We're going to have a different format for this one. There will be no PowerPoint slides. And I will be asking questions. And at the end of the seminar, you'll be putting your questions in the chat. You can put them anytime during the chat. And at the very end, Shannon will be reading them or sending them to me, and we'll answer all of your questions then. So I would like to also ask everyone when we get started to shut your video down so that we have enough bandwidth for all the people who may be joining with this. So right now we have 26, and I'm sure we'll have a few more people coming in. First of all, let me just introduce briefly Chief Mann, Chief Vincent Mann, who is the Turtle Clan chief of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation, which encompasses Passaic County, New Jersey, Warwick, New York, and surrounding areas in New York. Chief Mann has held the title of Turtle Clan Chief for about 12 years. And for the past 10 years, he's worked with us. He's worked with myself and my community engagement colleagues with the NYU Department/Division of Environmental Medicine in community engagement areas. He's participated in the construction and implementation of a community health survey with us, and focused on identifying and addressing health concerns within his community. To honor Chief Mann's efforts to shed light on his community to fight back after the toxic Ford dumping, which went on for over a decade. He was awarded the Russ Berry Foundation's highest award of Unsung Hero. He has lots and lots of other accolades. He's spoken at many, many universities, as well as not-for-profit foundations. And he helped launch the renovation of historic Native American church within his community. I also like to introduce Nicolene Picaro, who is Earth Mother and site manager for our recent Research to Action grant from the NIH. And she is a member of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation Turtle Clan. And as I said, site manager for our project. And she's been at the forefront of the Ramapough Environmental Justice Organizing Agency. And we've worked with her also for about 10 years. So with that said, I'd just like to again remind you that there will be no PowerPoint slides, and that I will be asking more like an interviewee, and I will be asking questions. Please put your questions into the chat, and we'll answer them at the end of the symposium. So Chief Mann and Nicolene, oh, I forgot to say, Nicolene is at the farm store that we're working on with the Muncie Three Sisters, and she has to take customers as they come in. So if you see her disappearing from that beautiful backdrop, she will be back, but don't worry, Chief Mann will stay with us the entire time and answer all of the questions. So, Chief, question for you. And please let me welcome you both very, very much for your time on this. So for those of us who are unfamiliar with your clan's history, can you tell us a little bit more about the history of the Ramapough Nation and specifically the Turtle Clan?
Sure. First of all, Kolomalsi, how is everybody doing? So the history of the Turtle Clan goes back probably about 12,000 years. We have lived within the Ramapough Mountains range for that time. Quite often, we're referred to as, living in the Ramapough Mountains for 300 years. And I often find myself correcting, people, letting them know that they've lived next to us for 300 years. And so the Turtle Clan has been in its footprint. You know, in the 1700s, Peter Hasenclever, an iron master and surveyor, came over the Ramapough Mountains and came into what became known as Ringwood, New Jersey, where he noticed, you know, a community of Native Americans who were living in dome-shaped hovels that were well kept. That was in a letter that he wrote back to his wife and daughter in Germany in 1764. Through that whole mining industry and surveying, you know, our people never left, you know, the footprint of where they are. And so when we have come to modern time, the Ramapough Turtle Clan is also a part of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation. Our headquarters are in Mahwah, New Jersey, which is where the Wolf Clan is, and in Hillburn, New York, which is where the Deer Clan is.
Thank you. Can you tell us how many members about are in the Ramapough Lunaape Nation and also within the Turtle Clan?
Sure. The Ramapough Lunaape Nation has approximately 5,000 enrolled members. The Turtle Clan has probably about 1,500 to 1,700 Turtle Clan members who are enrolled. Overall, there's probably an additional 10 to 12,000 Ramapough who are not on the rolls at this time.
You know, many people say they don't understand the relationship between the Lenape and the Brooklyn area, the Delaware area. That people that I speak with, even at NYU, are shocked that we have Native Americans living so close to the city. What's the relationship between the artifacts and the Lenape in New York City and in Brooklyn specifically?
You know, so New York City, Mannahatta, was named after the place where we would go to get our bows from the trees that grew there, which were hickory trees. But it was much more than that. So the relationship between, you know, that island and the mainland, you know, our people, you know, our people didn't live all stacked up in you know, 80 story building, right? And how we lived was, you know, by being in balance with the natural world. So while we had communities that were on, you know, on the island, we had part of our people which was in what is now New York and Connecticut. You know, our range was from the Raritan River, eastern Pennsylvania, all the way up to Albany, and some accounts list us as far east as the Connecticut River. One of the things that's confusing is that when colonists came here in droves, it happened so fast that our town names like Ramapough, Lamawo, which means downward slanting, it's a reference to the place which we live. You know, those names began to be applied to the people, and say, you know, so then we became known as the Ramapough. You know, people became known as the Hakansaki or the Akansaki, or the Tapan, or and many others. And as you can clearly see, they became known as names of towns, even to our language, which is Muncie, right? Muncie, New York, right? Muncie, PA, Muncie, Indiana. You know, that's kind of how that encompasses it. But, you know, Manhattan and, you know, the New Jersey, directly across from Manhattan on the New Jersey side where Liberty State Park is, you know, that whole area was a place where a a lot of the migration during summertime and the spring took place because of the overwhelming abundance of shellfish and the ones that swim.
Thank you for bringing together the intersection of the Ramapough Lunaape Clan and New York City and Brooklyn, so that people have a better idea that we are all connected, as you always tell me. I would also just ask that everybody take off their video so we have enough bandwidth and don't fall apart here. So Chief, many of us here on the call are toxicologists. And so I know maybe one of the things that people are very interested in is the fact that many of the Ramapough Turtle Clan live in Ringwood, New Jersey, which is northern New Jersey. And it's about, about 50 miles from New York City. And so, or maybe even less. Thank you. So we'd like to hear, and we'd like to hear more about what has happened. What is the devastating information about why the Ringwood Lunaape Turtle Clan, why they live on a Superfund site? And so can you help us? How did Ford wind up in Ringwood? What was the dumping like? Why, what's going on?
So I would say that we don't live in a Superfund site. I would say that a Superfund site, lives on us. And, something back in the early 1900s that occurred in this country, the beginning of what has been known as eugenics. And that core area of that project, just like colonization, right, is a project that's ongoing. That project was, focused on, the Ramapoughs and the Unkachog and other communities that were here. And in the early 1900s, Miss Harriman was approached by David Davenport after her husband had passed away with this thought process of eugenics, where she literally, took her money and put it into that. Same thing with the Rockefellers, the Fords, the Bushes, and others. And at that time, the state of New Jersey created the New Jersey Vineland Training School, which was also a part of that, and Cold Spring Laboratory in New York. And what that came out of was naturalists. So those very wealthy people wanted to know, how could you, take an apple tree and make it grow pears, right? Pears and apples. And then they took that to a really incredible step forward to, how could we take an arm off of somebody who didn't steal, who passed, and put it on to somebody who did steal, right? And maybe they wouldn't steal. It was that kind of thought process. But in 1923, Margaret Sanger, who was the creator of Planned Parenthood, and that consortium of very wealthy people, came up with 18 different ways in which to deal with the unwanted people of the Ramapough Mountain, namely the Ramapoughs. And their number one way in which they put forward in black and white in the paper was by a public lethal gas chamber. That didn't come to fruition. Sterilizations and institutionalized people did. Our women who were taken along with our young boys and young girls, the doctor at this place that was created, Letchworth Village, began to draw our young girls' anatomy and discovered how to sterilize them. So they were being sterilized without knowing. Public outcry prevented the public lethal gas chamber. But that is the same study on our people that led to the Holocaust. And the Vineland Training School had a German Jewish scientist who was working there, who left his wife and daughter here and took the study of eugenics with him to Europe, where he was then, rounded up by Adolf Hitler. And our belief is that the little black Bible that Adolf Hitler carried with him was actually the study of eugenics that was transcribed to German. And how that brings all of this together is that Henry Ford and Adolf Hitler were very good friends. Henry Ford just received the highest Distinguished Medal of Honor for a citizen by Adolf Hitler. They had the same mentality of, the machine. And so, that takes you from the 1900s to the 1940s. And then what happened was in 1956, the Ford Motor Corporation bought all the land in what we had called Mawawe, which was the place where the people gather. And they built a massive automobile manufacturing facility there. In front of that facility, they had these big troughs that were in front of the building all the way around, and they utilized that to actually dump the toxic material coming out of the paint booths known as paint sludge. When those were filled, they ended up starting to dump that over the fence of the property, which we had a community there called the Meadows. And when they dumped it over the fence, that literally went from New Jersey to New York. And it ended up being an area where a lot of our people had gotten sick too, from the deer clan. And eventually, with the highways that came through, that community was removed from there. And so when that all started, to happen, Ford Motor Corporation bought 900 acres of land in Ringwood, New Jersey, which was the mining complex plus. And what they did at that time was they wanted to remove over 1,100 of the Turtle Clan members who were living in pretty much broken down miners' houses, right? Because the mining industry had come to an end. And they wanted to build a self-contained executive housing community. The town of Ringwood would have received about $1 million a year in tax revenue from there. Again, public outcry came. And when public outcry came this time, Ford gave up, in 1964, they gave up their quest to remove everyone to create an executive housing. Within months of them giving up that quest, they began to dump their toxic material on the land which they owned. It was encouraged by the town of Ringwood, who actually wrote a letter to Henry Ford's grandson, Henry Ford, in Michigan, requesting that all of the industrial waste from that Mawa plant be brought and disposed of in our community, on the lands that we hunted, and in the streams that we fished on the lands that we gathered on, the ground that we played on, in the rivers, in the deep mine shafts. And at that time, our people were still drinking all the way up until 1990 from a spring, which was actually a few years ago, it was recorded as giving off mass acid mine drainage. The town of Ringwood, was saying that, oh, that's not true because the right conditions are not there. But in fact, the EPA was saying that it is acid mine drainage. In fact, Dr. Chuck Stead and his students actually did some sampling of water that was coming from there and down the line where it crosses over Margaret King and enters the brook that goes to the Wanacue Reservoir. One of the things that they found that was really bizarre was that the oxygen levels that should have been depleted were actually increased, which meant that in St. Regis mine that there had been movement in there, and that oxygen was somewhere has been, it's been exposed, right? The stuff that was in the mine. And this was after they had already did the work there and moved on. And so, you know, for 58 years, about 58 years, our people have been suffering every kind of health ailment that you can list. Um, you know, I saw a list the other day that was given to me that was created, I believe, in 2007. And so I start looking through all these names on these pages. There's like 6 or 8 pages, right? Some of them are double road. And I'm looking through them and I'm like, oh. And I looked at my aunt and I said, is this a list of what I think it is? She goes, I believe so. And when I flipped back to the front page, I looked at the top left corner and it said died. There was over 200 and something human beings that have been recorded on there as being you know, have passed since 2007. And I believe the earliest was recorded at like 1978 or 9. And then we have to think about the fact that we probably lost that or more since 2007 to 2022 with no recourse or help from anybody. I mean, the mines when Ford's gurus there, the sludge and the cardboard and all the stuff from the plant was building up. So what they decided to do was to burn it, and they would set it on fire. Obviously, it was chemical fire. The reports from the fire department was that, you know, this cannot continue because they don't have the capacity to put these fires out. And in fact, those fires burnt for weeks on end. And in the New York Times, there was even an article where they said that, you know, looking to the west, you could see the orange glow, which in fact was the fires that were raging there that created, you know, dioxin, which is something that the EPA, you know, still resists me pressuring them to actually test the soil for.
Sorry, Chief. So that leads us to, and also let me just add that we, Department of Environmental Medicine, have done a lot of exposure assessment work. And we have found massive contamination in soil, not only on the Superfund site, but also around your church. And we found water in the ponds that you fish in to have heavy metals, and the fish to be accumulating some of those heavy metals. And so we're continuing that work with you. And it's been a nightmare for you and your people.
No,
So,
if I could just
please.
jump in there
Oh,
real quick.
please.
So over the summer, the state of New Jersey called a press conference and in Ringwood, and that press conference was to announce the filing of a lawsuit against Ford Motor Corporation by the state of New Jersey for natural resource damages. In the actual complaint, when you read it, it literally reads like a criminal complaint, because even though it's not, right, but the state of New Jersey actually admits in there that, you know, that the turkeys were tested, which I never heard before. The deer were tested, the squirrels, the fish, the plants. They literally, everything had been tested, and everything that they tested, right, nobody should have ever touched. But that information was not given to us. That information didn't come available to us until, you know, August of 2022. And that is, you know, I have to be, how do I say, I need to hold myself back from exploding, because, you know, we have to look at those people who are in official capacity. Who can we go to get help from, even though they all were a part of the dumping, right?
We also, thank you, Chief, and we also found an untested well when I say we, I mean environmental medicine, myself and our community, where the water was never tested and was coming into the church community center where people have their gatherings and their healing. And it turned out that it was highly contaminated with metals. And the town finally, after being convinced, adamantly changed it to a municipal, changed the area and the church to municipal well. So
But you can continue on right there, because neither the state of New Jersey, the town of Ringwood, Passaic County Health Department, nor the EPA, none of them took action on the report and the presentation that we provided. That proves the migration of all of those heavy metals and contaminants that they say are not really leaving the site, because it is leaving the site. And all of those, all of that water, groundwater, surface water, you name it, right? It only heads to one place. It heads to the place that supplies 1/3 the population of the most populous state in the country, right? And one sits back and wonders, okay, Newark has a lead issue, but lead doesn't just leach like that from pipes for absolutely no reason, not just because they're old. And the state of New Jersey jumped in there really, really quick to change the reports on the TV that said from Ross Barack, the mayor of Newark, that the lead wasn't coming from the pipes. But all of a sudden, the lead is coming from the pipes, and the state issued a $50 million bond to change those service lines from lead pipes to copper. And I applauded them for that, right? Because they should have done that. But what they are not admitting and what they're not doing is to protect that water, which is coming from Ringwood, New Jersey, to all those people who are drinking it. They're still failing the people.
So Chief, on that note, your people have been exposed to very high concentrations. In fact, you're the only Superfund site that's been delisted and relisted twice in the country. And you had contamination that nobody would take when they tried to dump it. So what about the health of your people? You kind of got into it with the death aspect of it, but what kind of diseases are you seeing? What kind of cancer, mental health issues? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I would say the majority of the community, and it's not just we can't say just the Ringwood community, right? We have to actually expand that because it's also Wanacue and Midvale and Haskell and West Milford, right? And Vernon, all the places where the kids of the adults who were living at that time had moved their families out of there thinking that they could outrun that. And in fact, that was not possible. And I'm not a scientist, but I read, back in the day when Love Canal was going on, that the president actually signed an executive order to help those people and remove the red tape. Our site is worse than Love Canal, in my opinion. And not only did that, they removed the people. But one of the reports that came out, and when it made it to the newspaper, the EPA was actually sending, doctors up there because they wanted to check the people's DNA to see if the DNA had been in fact affected and changed, right? Because of the exposures. And when it came out, into public view that this was something that they were doing, they stopped, but I can only imagine that once those triggers, are turned on, that it's going to be generations upon generations, before they go the opposite way. And that is part of the work that we're doing with NYU and yourself, is to find other alternative pathways, to help our people heal at a faster rate. Will we be able to save everybody? No. Will we be able to make their lives easier? Yes. And so, when we sit there and think about the mental state of the community, that is one of abandonment. It is one of mistrust. It is one of complete annihilation and devastation of what a community is. It is them watching the loss of their children dying, 10 years old, new births, stillbirths, 30-year-old mothers and fathers dying of cancers, their mothers and fathers dying of cancers. There's almost no uncles and aunts. I mean, we watched Uncle Billy and his whole family disappear right in front of our face, right? We watched his mother, his wife die, and then we watched his son die, and then we watched him die. And that was the house that they found dioxin, right? That was above levels, in the attic, furthest from where the fires were burning. And, you know, when we tell this story of our people, and what they've been through, I mean, you know, school, you know, learning disabilities, being told you had to go to a different class, or giving a coloring book, you know, to color the best picture, instead of actually taking the test, and then leaving school by ninth grade or eighth grade. You know, having the stigma of all of that affect you when you go to get a job because of your last name. And if you have a different last name, it's your address. So it is beyond my comprehension that only the handful of human beings that we have assisting us, is there. There are no, the federal agencies are not here. EPA is abandoned the people. You know, they told me point blank, all those CAG meetings and all those nights that I went there pouring my heart out. And eventually in the end, when they told me, well, this is just about the cleanup, you know, I'm like, well, what are we even here for? If you're, because of the lawsuit that took place, right? The lawyers of the people told all the doctors and the agencies and stuff like that that they couldn't talk to their client. But once that was done, once that lawsuit had settled out, they should have came right back and picked up where they left off. And they just completely abandoned our community, you know, with no remorse, with no humanity, you know. And so what is the overall picture of our community? Yeah, you could go there and see that they're having a birthday party and they're laughing and, you know, having a beer and a smoke and all this stuff, and kids are playing in the playground. What you're not seeing, right, is that while they're doing that, you know, they're also taking the pill or this or that or the other thing because they have cancer or they have other kind of health ailments that are going on. You know, or maybe they're celebrating the life of somebody who just died. You can't have that much loss of your family, right, surrounding you and you ever be okay. Never. I laugh, I joke, I have a good time, you know, but when it gets down to it, when all the lights are off and the computers are shut down and the phone turns off, and what does your mind do? Right? It just eats away at you. And so that leads to alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, you know, total withdrawal of society. Um, you know, it's crimes against humanity, you know, quite frankly.
It it definitely is. I'd like to just bring up a couple more points. So one of the things that is on the EPA list when they finally do something is that the people are living on cadmium, nickel, lead, arsenic, vanadium. The story of 1,4-dioxane. I was at a community advisory group CAG meeting, Superfund and the community, and they did not, EPA did not tell the Ramapough people or the chief that they found 1,4-dioxane in the mine areas. And how it broke was 6 months later, what we used to call the Bergen record broke the story. And it was only then that the EPA came and said, yes, you have 1,4-dioxane. But there's also benzene still present. There's dioxin
Throughout the community.
Throughout the community, in the soil, in the air. So it's definitely a devastation. And Chief Mann, so what kind of diseases are you seeing more. And we also have worked on a survey for 2 years with you, Chief, and the Community Advisory Group. And we found some really high numbers and incidents of disease. What kind of diseases do you see most often?
We have asthma is probably really severe, diabetes, very severe, even children being diagnosed with diabetes when they're like 4 years old, 5 years old. Cancers, I mean, Van Dunk Lane, every single house has had more than one cancer and more than one death
Per household.
per household. Ovarian cancer, right? There has been breast cancer, throat cancer, brain cancer. Little Colin, who was 10 years old, had 2 rare cancers that intertwined through his spine, and he died blind in his uncle's arms. And heart disease, all of those things that that you look at and you say, well, there's got to be something wrong when every household in the community has bore witness to somebody in their family dying of a cancer or having all these different health ailments, and mental health issues. And if it isn't because of where they work, then it has to be where they live. And if it isn't in just their home, then it's also in their environment. And how does anybody sit here and witness all of this from 1982 or 3, when this was listed in the first rounds on the national priorities list with places like Love Canal, right? And nobody does anything, nothing. And that only leads to be one answer to that question. If somebody was to ask it, it's very simple, right? It's this. What's the color of my phone case? Black. What's the color of that little spot right there?
White.
White. And it doesn't matter if it's black, red, brown, orange, but because we're not that community, well, let me take, African-American out of there, because African-American communities have been able in the state of New Jersey to get help where they needed it, right? I don't know, Garfield, weren't you a part of Garfield and some of those other areas, right?
And Newark, yes.
Right. And for me, it's not taking that away, right? It's me sitting here saying, what the hell about us, right? How come nobody other than Judy Zelikoff, who has carried her humility with her and fought for us, right? Even within your own institution, even with your own bosses, right? To make sure that you stayed a part of our community because you saw what it was that we were lacking. Not the EPA, not the ATSDR, not the Environmental Justice Office for the EPA, not the administrators for the EPA, past and present, not the governors of the state of New Jersey, not the lawmakers in the state of New Jersey or at the federal level, not the town, not any official in Passaic County. Nobody has come to help us at the level that you have. Michael Edelstein, right? And Chuck Stead. Outside of that, we have Anita, right? But people actually doing something like that, right? Chuck Stead, Michael Edelstein, Judy Zelikoff.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Thank you. So I'd like to, since looking at the time, I want to make sure we talk about your newest program and what you're doing to help the people. And thanks to the NIH, what we're able to help you with. So please tell us about the Muncie Three Sisters Farm, how it came to be, what you're doing, and how successful it's been up till now.
Sure, and thank you. So Michaeline and I created 2 entities. One was a for-profit known as Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm. And we also created Ramapough Culture and Land Foundation, which is our 501c3. when we originally were looking for land to actually lease for $1 a year for 99 years from the state of New Jersey. They literally came back and told me that I needed to pay $2,000 a year, which was absolutely insane because they're the ones who gave the permit to dump the toxic waste for a year in Ringwood to Ford. But when I couldn't get them to see their shortcomings, Michaeline and I took our first mortgage payment for our house that we had built or reconstructed. And we leased 9 acres of land. Our intentions at that time was to grow 9 acres of hemp. And the idea behind that was for us to generate income, right? So that we could get the extra help that we needed and utilize it also as medicine for the people. Unfortunately, what happened was COVID came. So Michaeline and I and a couple of other organizations worked with us, and we just put in a small garden just to be reconnected to the soil. And we were successful in providing over 100,000 pounds worth of supplies to our community. We were also successful in supplying 6,000 pounds worth of supplies to the Navajo Nation, who are federally recognized. We were also successful in delivering 6 tractor trailer loads to federally recognized tribes out west with 39,000 pounds of health supplies in them each. And so from March, I guess, March, April to probably November, we didn't have one incident of COVID in our community. We were super critical, protecting ourselves, protecting the people. Don't go to the grocery store, tell me what you need, we'll go get it. Everything from diapers to strips for diabetes testing, to ensure, to canned food, fresh food, meats, turkey, all of that stuff, hygiene stuff, masks came to us by the thousands. We turned that around and distributed that back out to the Stockbridge Muncie in Wisconsin. We distributed it to Muncie Delaware Nation in Canada, as well as Ramapough Lunaape Nation and other community members who weren't us who were in need. And so the following year, we began to plant our garden at the farm. We were so successful, struggling because we didn't have equipment, we didn't have money to pay people. It was a struggle with 9 acres, 5 miles of vegetable beds. Even we did grow hemp. We were, I guess, successful overall if you looked at the big picture. And then this year, at the end of last year, I believe it was, when we filed for this grant with NIH and NYU and us, and University of
New Mexico.
And this year we were able to get private grant funding, as well as take on a lot of debt ourselves. And we really built the farm up, and we were able to successfully grow 6,000 pounds worth of vegetables that we distributed to the community for free. And then when that aspect of it came to be, we were awarded the grant, right? And so the grant retroacted back to May. And then Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm, Ramapough Cultural and Land Foundation, and NYU together and students and professionals had some beautiful, successful farmers markets. And, it kind of came into it late for this year. But next year, there's a lot of things that we're going to do a little bit differently. We're going to decrease the volume of plants per vegetable, but we're going to increase the amount of different types of vegetables. So we still have that volume of food. Our idea and thought process was that without getting the help that we need, we had to try to figure out, as Mikey being an RN and you know, in the medicinal world, we realized that food is medicine. It's just as important as air and water and soil. And so the thought process was, let's get seeds for vegetables that are higher in nutritional and medicinal value, right? Like we all know, if you eat spinach or broccoli or green beans, right? I mean, who thinks of green beans as a superfood? You know, but green beans is a superfood. If you're going to eat cabbage, you know, eat the red cabbage, it's a superfood. You know, we don't have the capacity to grow, you know, 500 acres of hemp where we could then take the hemp seed, right? Because you could also eat that, right? Um, so I would say that overall, you know, this year was an actual what other people think of as success, right? We really do think that we've been successful even when we didn't really grow into the soil. You know, we realized that with the community engagement, you know, from universities, you know, not just NYU, but others, when we began to, Michaeline and I began to look at that, you know, we looked at it as an opportunity to be able to learn how to help ourselves, right? And then realize that we always had that capability, even though we've been told our whole entire life that, you know, we will never amount to anything, you know, we'll never be successful, you know, have people turn a blind eye to us, like the EPA and the state and the town. But I think that we're really beginning to, you know, make our way, you know, specifically with the help of NYU and you, Judy, and the team that we have that's working with us now, and Esther and others, because even while we're trying to focus on the Turtle Clan, and then it's the northern region of New Jersey, and then it will be, you know, across the country. I myself just we just created a new company that you'll be glad to know, which is called Turtle Environmental Group. We did it out of Delaware. We hold 51% of that company, which is a environmental consulting company that is going to utilize the technologies of volcanic partners in the cement lock process, which we've been adding more and more things on there. So we'll be able to address air, we'll be able to address water, not just the soil, and removing those toxins forever.
That's fabulous, and that's the first I'm hearing of it. We'll have to absolutely talk a lot about that. So I want you, please put in your questions. I want to ask people now to put in any questions you may have. I see one from Erin. But before we close this part of it, I'd like to ask you, Chief, you have an audience of 37 people, faculty members, doctoral, master's students, people that I don't recognize their name, but they're from all over. What message do you want to get across to your audience here?
So the message that I would want to get across to our audience is that they need to look at you, and they need to see what you committed on a personal level, right? On all personal levels, that humanity and humility, you know, go together. And if you don't look at life and what you do as a professional in this field, you know, you have to keep that in there, right? You have to remember your humility. You have to remember that if you have something that somebody could use to help them, that you need to put that forth. And I can't see, and I don't know what any of those people do, but what I would say to them is that they need to come to you and your team, and they need to, you know, take their departments and add their departments to what we do, because, you know, NYU is international, right? I can't say that I have the want to leave this country, but there is enough for us to do here, right? And to work and side by side with the other universities that had other disciplines, to really, take back control of our environment and our natural world to help put it back into balance and make people's lives better.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I just want to add before we go to the questions, that we have had, as you brought up, 3 successful farmers markets where my students, many of them are on this call, and myself, and even our business manager, Alex, attended. And you gave away, I think, 1,100 pounds at the first farmers market: corn, beans, squash, tomatoes, potatoes, and it was an amazing success. And the second and the third as well, we had a farm event where people traveled up to Sussex to the farm to become acquainted with it. And I would just ask everyone, to really consider that the indigenous populations, most of the populations, 3/4 of all indigenous tribes live less than or equal to 3 miles from a toxic waste dump or a Superfund site. And this is not just the Ramapough, this is all over the country, including the Cheyenne River Sioux in South Dakota, who live on uranium mines and gold and arsenic and can't drink water. So with that said, you can all please turn on your videos. And we have a question. Go ahead, Shannon. Questions up to you.
Hi, so Aaron sent a question. Has there ever been a cleanup of the interiors of the affected homes, similar to what you do for whole house remediation of lead dust contamination inside a home?
So there has been some. But because of the mistrust, a lot of our people refuse to let those people in their house. And when I say mistrust, I'm talking about, what happened there after the discovery of all the chemicals, right? And the lying to them and things like that.
There was a Mann versus Ford HBO documentary, which I recommend everyone to look at to understand the history. That was a lawsuit that Chief Mann referred to. And the lawyers made a lot of money. The people didn't get very much at all, anywhere from a couple hundred to 3,000 for all their deaths and dying and everything else. And when I came in, we asked, what blood? Is there anything available that's stored? What about the data from the lawyers? There was nothing. They took everything and left. Right, Chief Mann?
They wanted to make it so that there was, no evidence of truth.
So, and we've also, and I have to thank Chief Mann, myself, because if it wasn't for him and Vivian, who was an elder in the community who passed away from a sudden heart attack on her birthday last August, I would never have been embraced. Because for those of you who have not worked in community engagement, you really have to know that it could take years to build the trust. Especially if you don't look like the community you're working with. But luckily, Chief Mann says I'm part, so I'm all good now. So any other questions from students? Is this something that you knew of before? Is this new to you? What can we all do to help? So what are your thoughts about this presentation? Anybody want to add anything? So I will tell you what we're doing now. First of all, I'd like to thank all the students, Tatiana. I'm just going down the list so I don't forget anyone. Florence, Gabriella, Tree, Rahana, Jania. Those are the students I see right now who have given their own free time to work on the farmers market, to take samples, to put tables together. And thank you. thank you, the students and everyone else who's worked with us. So I see Marion and Liz. Liz, go ahead, please.
I was wondering what the reaction was to the publishing in the Bergen Record when that came out. Was there an outcry, or was it simply, oh, okay, another story, and throw the newspaper away?
No,
I mean, our media have been denigrated, by our recent past presidents. They've become persona non grata also. So I'm just wondering whether the media has helped in any way to get your plight out there. I mean, I just can't believe Ringwood would be as indifferent as they are, not only to you, but their entire community. If it's going into their water as well, it's in their best interest to clean this up. What is wrong with them?
So to answer your first question, the media was incredible. And, the Record with Toxic Legacy and Janbury Crumb, was an award-winning series. He personally won an award for environmental investigations, and they did their own testing. It was unbelievable. What happened after that, though, was that USA Today ended up buying the Bergen Record. And when they bought the Bergen Record, they immediately went and had their IT people try to scrub Toxic Legacy from all places. Unfortunately, they couldn't do that, and we have IT people too. So it was a matter of having to dig, but we ended up recovering most of those things to keep that alive. One has to understand, that by the Ramapough Muncie people still being here after all this time and everything that's been done, 39 miles outside of New York City, we have a lot of knowledge of what a lot of people did wrong to us. When I said crimes against humanity, I wasn't joking. Our people still had gotten death threats not all that long ago, because we were pushing this to be into the media. We don't know if people in the media got death threats, but rest assured, this goes to, one has to think that, Anheuser-Busch, right, had a contract with the Wanakee Reservoir for water for their plant in Newark. When this all broke out, they took their contract and said, no, thank you, and ripped it up, right? This is Pandora's box. When this opens up, there will be nobody who could stop it. So the best thing that they could do is to, tell a lie, and then you got to tell another lie to cover that lie, tell another one to cover that one. My Uncle Wayne went to Washington, D.C. and was told in that closed door session and hearing in Washington, D.C. with Congress, with no recording devices whatsoever, not even a pen or a paper, was that and we know the truth about the Wanakee Reservoir, but it'll never see the light of day. And that can just be words, or that could also be a threat, right, from the federal government. Because the reality of this is that it has affected way more people than us, way more people. And how could any of that become a reality in today's time? Slowly, we're being grinded, but, we are making the efforts to always exist, right? To continue to exist in our homeland, to continue to say this story, no matter how many times it hurts me, no matter how many times, over 90 times already, that I've been to a funeral and had to officiate it for our people, I don't know why the media has chosen to almost black this out. It has to come from the highest levels, be honest with you. You can't have all of this that's being said is backed up by all the documentation that's ever been there. We're not the ones who, wrote in the newspaper back in the 80s that, the contaminants from the site were leaching into the Wanakee Reservoir. I didn't write that. right? But they don't want to, and now when you ask that question, you're like, oh no, but even if it did, the reservoir is 7 miles long. So what if it's 7 miles long? What about bioaccumulation? What about the fact that you don't have a reverse osmosis system or other system that's preventing that stuff from even getting to the Wanakee Reservoir? And as a matter of fact, it was the North Jersey Water District supply that actually is the reason why the dumping even stopped in 1974. Because they told Ford Motor Corporation and the town of Ringwood that you can't continue to do this because it's, guess what, leaching into the water, right? And that's what reason why that dumping had stopped. And it wasn't only in Ringwood that it happened. 2-hour radius from Mawa is where Ford was disposing of those chemicals. They were paying farmers, right, like $500 a truckload, so they'd load up like 5 barrels in the back of their trucks, dispose of them at their farms. Where is that at? This is something that's going to continually come to the surface, years after year after year after year. When you sit there and think about the fact that Ford was disposing of 16 million pounds of paint sludge alone every quarter, and we know that they dumped from 1956, right, to 1974. How many millions of tons is that, or 100,000s of tons, or whatever it is, right? It's insane.
So I'd just like to ask, thank you, Chief. So is Marion still on? Marion, you had a question? I guess not. Marion says, thank you so much, Chief and Dr. Zelikoff, for sharing the story with us. Also, Tatiana has one question and then we'll wrap up. What advice, this is one of our students who you know well, Chief, from the farmers markets. What advice would you give someone who wants to spread the word on the Ramapough Lunaape Turtle Clan?
Be careful. Be careful. I just connected with another gentleman yesterday. His name is Todd something. He's a part of a really huge nonprofit out west. And that his job is to work with federally recognized tribes with storage tanks, super funds, brownfield, and one other thing. They are directed to not really work with state recognized tribes, only federally recognized tribes, but the tribes in Virginia that got federal recognition, they were helping them before that because they had those issues. So he is going to be looking in to see how they can assist us also with realizing that impossible thing called justice. Honestly, I have to say you have to err on the side of caution, but trying to get the word out, sharing all the documentations. I mean, we were in the environmental, what do you call it? The journal, you and I.
Oh, we published a paper on the relationship. Gabriella Meltzer, who's on the call, was the first author on the relationship between exposure to the Superfund and increased incidence of bronchitis and asthma in the Turtle Clan.
Yep. So, to promote things like that, to promote our little documentary that we did, also to promote the work that we're doing with Anita Bakchi with the, Meaning of the Seed, right? Our Land, Our Story, the book. Get the Lead Out by Dr. Chuck Stead. Public pressure is amazing when you can actually put it together, right? We see that throughout history. For our people to be there and to be on the side of the rebels, right, in the Revolutionary War, which became America, and then to have everything happen to us afterwards, right, and to see that we're still here, even though we're beaten and trodden upon and broken down and tethered and tethers, we're still here. That's the spirit of the human being, right? That's the spirit of the Ramapough people. That's the spirit of this sacred mountain, you know, that has protected us and provided for us for 12,000 years. And it is our responsibility not just to heal the humans, but also, you know, all the relatives who live in the woods and in the water, you know, and the two-leggeds as well, the ones that fly. You know, that's our inherent responsibility, all human beings, not just indigenous people. And when we attempt to put ourselves back into the natural world and understand that that's what's supposed to happen, that that's where the balance was, whether it was scientific or if it was local indigenous knowledge, you know, those two things need to come together. And it's not to save our planet, right? It's to save each other. You know, Mother Earth has, you know, cried a lot of tears and flooded, right? And cleared the earth of all the bad things. Mother Earth has, you know, been cold and turned the heat up, and things were burnt and all gone, and life had to be restarted again. You know, you know, sometimes she's cold and she shivers, right? And we have earthquakes, and that's to remind us that, you know, certain places are supposed to remain sacred and for us to see and visit, but not necessarily to live upon, right? And then all of a sudden we say, oh, well, you know, that's we got to put floodgates in. Why do we have to put floodgates in? You know, because the human spirit has said, you know, I want to be so close to the water, and I want to remove all the trees, and I want to pave everything so that everything has this hard surface, and, you know, you can't even touch the soil. And the water just runs away so fast, you can't even sit there and watch it like I can here, right? Absorb into the soil, you know. We as humans have to come together and really work towards human change, which is known as climate change today, because it really is the human. And I think that if I could leave anything with anybody is to put humility back in your life if you've lost it. Really think about what that word means. It doesn't mean to be humiliated. You know, that we, all of us humans, are related, one shape or another. No one is better than the other. You know, remember your original instructions. You know, if you're Catholic, that's the 10 commandments, right? If you're an indigenous person, you know, that's wisdom, honor, respect, humility, love. You know, if we live our lives that way and then do our job, right? Not do our job and then live our life. We need to, you know, live our lives with that thought and try to remember that being born unto this world this time around, right, is a journey of healing. And so everybody that's a part of this, where we are right here now, right, is about healing, right? What you're doing is about healing. You know, we look at it like that, it's more natural, right? It means more, it'll be more successful. So Judy, you know, Dr. Zelikoff, I really appreciate you and your team, you know, and everybody who's been a part of our lives to help us help ourselves. And I'm sure that, you know, being connected to us also provides healing back, right?
It certainly does. Thank you. Given the time, I want to thank everyone who has stayed on. I also want to let you know that in the chat, we've given you links to our documentary, links to our NYU Ramapough homepage, which has now about 860 followers. Congratulations to all of us for that, because that social media is the way to get the message out. Although maybe not Twitter nowadays. So thank you, Chief Mann. Mikey, I know you're not there, but thank you so much. If anyone's ever interested in visiting the farm, please let us know, and we'll make that happen. Thank you, Chief Mann. Talk to you on Tuesday. Have a safe and blessed weekend.